Robert Whittaker takes on Kelvin Gastelum next Saturday, April 17th. And boys, we've talked about the matchup and whether or not we thought it was, the right one to make. It's a fight that was supposed to happen, got canceled last minute because Whittaker had that bowel collapse in on him. Was originally for the 185 belt before Izzy ascended to the throne. Now we're getting this fight a couple years later. One, what's the excitement level here? And two, who do you think is going to actually take it? I mean, both guys have kind of, had their ups and downs since this fight was originally booked. Let's look at predictions. So, Matt, I'll start with you.
It's going to be an interesting fight. I think it's tailor-made to be one of those classic, 5-round war type of fights because both of these guys can go the distance. They can go 25 minutes and they can bring it for all 25. I think it's going to be a back and forth battle. I don't see one guy having a distinct advantage over the other. And I think that's going to make for an exciting fight. Easily my pick for fight of the night. In terms of recent successes and recent failures, I would like to lean towards Robert Whittaker emerging victorious, just because Kelvin Gastelum had that stretch there of 3 losses in a row. He looked like he just couldn't put it together for whatever reason. Close fights still in some of those, but it's just one of those things, man. One guy is on a win streak, 2-fight win streak, and I know Kelvin just won his last outing against Ian Heinisch, but Robert Whittaker is a former champ, and I think he's looked more like that guy ready to step in there and challenge for the title rather than Gastelum. Gastelum has been a mainstay at the top of this division for, we know as however long it's been. It seems like forever, right? But like I said, I expect it to be a damn good fight. I expect Whittaker to win, but I don't expect it to be one of those things where either guy necessarily gets squashed, so to speak, right? I think they'll both have their moments where they both look good. But I think at the end of the day, I'm going decision Whittaker.
Yeah, I'm just super excited that we're getting to see this fight happen at all because I was very excited for it to happen the first time and then didn't happen. So the fact that we're getting it, period, is very exciting for me. I will take it, short notice, whatever it may be. Yeah, and since that time too, where they were matched up, I think that they have gone in different directions. Yeah, they've both suffered a loss, at least in the case of Whittaker, right, losing his title to Adesanya. And I don't think that Kelvin has completely fallen off a cliff because he did have that 3-fight losing streak. I feel like it was the case of, matchups being a little bit tough for him. But at the same time, I do think he's dropped off a little bit, at least from what we saw on that run that he did go on to get up to the Adesanya interim title fight. And then as for Whittaker, man, I feel like, yeah, he hasn't been knocking people dead in his winning streak that he's currently on, but I feel like he's looking, sharper maybe than he was, on his way to becoming champion and being champion. People aren't giving him enough credit. There's just no denying that in these recent fights. So I would argue that he's, maybe gotten even a little bit better since the time that he's lost the title. So regardless of that, though, I think that this matchup, these two guys are just made to have a very fun, exciting fight and should be relatively competitive for the most part. But I do think that Whittaker will have the edge in most areas. It'll be interesting, I think, to see if Kelvin kind of tries to, out wrestle him a little bit or take it in that direction, just because I think it's a good idea to mix things up against Whittaker, but we've seen that his takedown defense is, rather solid and he gets up very quickly and, he can take you down if he needs to. People don't look back at that first Yoel fight enough where ended up turning the tide on him with, one leg in the later round. So the guy is just, I think he's always going to be a supremely underappreciated fighter for the skills that he does have. And like I said, I feel like he's just getting sharper and looking better and better on this recent stretch. And against Kelvin, who I think the fact that they were lined up to fight the first time, and this is a really big opportunity for Kelvin considering how it came together right now, that'll be fuel and motivation for him to come in on point. And having studied Whittaker already, that helps too. So I give him a good chance, but I don't know. It's just hard for me to go against Whittaker when you look at the history of this, a time frame since they were supposed to fight originally, right? And I think that Whittaker will end up finding maybe a late finish, fourth round TKO maybe, just because Kelvin really needs this one. I think he'll be kind of aggressive as it goes on, especially if it does get kind of wild. And we've seen him get dropped before. Obviously, that Adesanya fight where he was nearly finished. And yes, it was Adesanya, but Whittaker is getting sharper and sharper, as I continue to mention. So I like the Australian former champ here, man. I do.
Yeah, it's, again, as you both have alluded to, they've gone in different directions, and it's hard not to lean Whittaker, especially when you look at, since he moved up to middleweight when he used to fight back at welterweight back in the day, he's lost once to Israel Adesanya. He's been undefeated otherwise against all other opponents. And that loss to Adesanya, again, was a little bit more competitive than I think some people remember, but was still, Izzy doing Izzy's thing and still finishing him, right? I mean, it was still a hard knockdown at the end of round 1 and then an easy-ish finish for him in round 2. Whereas Gastelum really gave Adesanya a run for his money. I mean, even Gastelum has said he wonders, if it was just he had just been hit too many times in terms of when he seemingly rocked Adesanya that takedown instead of trying to keep it on the feet, what would have happened. That's really the worst shape we've seen Adesanya in quite some time in a fight, as competitive at middleweight. So looking back at this, I agree with you, Drake. I think Whittaker's skills since that fight, he's gotten sharper. I think he's gotten a little bit more patient, especially. He picks and times his shots much, similar to what Brunson did, right? Brunson and Whittaker were both known for being a little wild on their rise. And as Brunson's kind of tightened that up and been smarter, I think Whittaker's kind of done the same thing, and it's worked out for both of them. Gastelum's losing streak at the same time, right, was to Adesanya, which is no shame there. A split decision against Darren Till, which was kind of back and forth, kind of a bad matchup there. And then he got caught by Hermanson with the sub early on, right? That fight didn't go very long. He just got caught in a sub. So, it's hard for me to say that Gastelum's really fallen off a cliff here, especially with how good he looked against Heinisch. And I think he has a stronger chin. I definitely expect Robert Whittaker to get knocked down at least once because that's what he does in fights, right? I could easily see him knocking down Gastelum, though. And if this turns into a wild fight, I think it favors Whittaker. I really do. I think he's going to have a little bit more technical boxing, just a better job of, pinpointing strikes and really taking advantage of it. Whereas Gastelum, I'm not so sure. But if Gastelum does mix in the wrestling and is able to build upon what he did against Heinisch, I could actually see him taking this. And I was a strong, Whittaker easily beats Gastelum going into the original title fight, really up until the Heinisch fight, where I feel like Gastelum has made some improvements. So I'm still going to go Whittaker here. I'm going to go by decision. I think it's going to be a good back and forth, but it's going to be a really good fight. And I don't think we're missing out that much compared to the title fight that we were promised back in the day.
I like the fact that you mentioned Brunson there and kind of how they've both cleaned up their wildness, because that first fight, the fight that they had, was
right, exactly.
Definition of that.
Yeah,
it was the storm being brought to Whittaker, and he came out on the other side, right?
Yes, yeah, and yeah, I mean that just shows how these guys are evolving. So it looks like we got 3 Robert Whittakers. Couple decisions, one by 4th round TKO. We'll see how it goes. Should be a great fight either way. Let us know in the comments who you've got going into this fight. If you think we're wrong and you think Gastelum's going to pull off the upset, let us know. If you think any of our points were off, by all means, challenge us. We'll definitely talk to you and, show why we're the experts. You know what I'm saying? But make sure you hit the like button, subscribe button, the bell notification. And yeah, this fight should be great. Let's just hope no one gets a collapsed bowel.
Never want that.